Hi everybody, this is Michelle and I would like to wish you a very warm welcome to our second language Wakey Shakey video. I hope that over the last week you have been actively noticing examples of the present simple across the curriculum and asked your ALD teacher for more practice. If not, there's still plenty of time. Language learning is really a case of little but often in order to avoid a plateau. The dreaded language learning plateau happens when you've learned enough to be able to communicate, but you stop moving forwards because you aren't sure how to, or because you run out of motivation. Either way, little but often can really support you being an active language learner. So if you would like a separate Wakey Shakey notebook so that you can be active and keep a record of all of the things that we're talking about, then please just let your ALD teacher know and we will be more than happy to help. If you remember last week, we looked at this chart which shows the link between language skills and language systems, and we looked specifically at grammar and the present simple. This week I'd like to keep looking at systems, but something a little bit different, which is lexis, or in layman's terms, vocabulary and vocabulary learning. So just before we start, I want to think a little bit about what it means to know a word. Because I think understanding what it means to know a word can really help us to improve the way that we use the vocabulary that we already have, but also to acquire more vocabulary and make it active rather than passive. So, what does it mean to know a word? Just have a think with your teacher for a minute. The first thing that we really need to know is what the word means in context and how the meanings of words change, because the meaning of words is not static. So, how do we use it with the correct meaning in the correct context? So, for example, here, he spent the afternoon reading. The word spent means something different than in this sentence where I've spent all my money. Okay, so we need to be able to understand and be able to use different items of vocabulary in different contexts. We need to know how to spell it correctly, of course. Spelling is one of those things that I think we focus on an awful lot, and it's right to focus on it, but I think we also need to give equal focus to the other aspects of the word and what it means to know vocabulary as well. We also need to know how to pronounce the word correctly with the correct stress. For example, when this word is a verb, the pronunciation changes to when it's a noun. So for example, when it's a verb, the stress is on the second syllable, record. Okay. When it's a noun, it's record. So obviously this changes depending on the part of speech that it is, and we need to know this as well so that there's no breakdown in communication. We need to know about collocation. Collocation is really what words go with each other, and this is really, really important in terms of understanding how to use words. If we know the word lie, we need to know that you tell a lie. You don't say a lie, you tell a lie. If we know the word poem, we need to know that you recite a poem. You don't tell a poem. Okay, and again, this is really, really key in terms of avoiding breakdowns in communication. So sometimes it's not enough to say, what does this word mean? But it's also really, really useful to say, what collocations does this word have? How is this word used? Sometimes that's a more useful question. We also need to know about connotations. These three words objectively mean something quite similar, but the feeling behind each of those words is a little bit different. When we look at words, we need to know what connotations they have, i.e. what's the feeling behind the word? What's the difference between slim and skinny? What's the difference between skinny and emaciated? I think this is quite a good example because it shows very, very clearly whether there's a positive or a negative connotation. If you're not sure which is which, then just ask your teacher. But again, we need to know what connotations words have in order to be able to use them properly. We also need to think about register. And when I talk about register, I mean whether the word is polite or rude or formal or informal. It really means a sensitivity to the people that you're speaking to. For example here, do you fancy a cuppa, or would you like a cup of tea? Obviously there's a very, very different register, and again, if you're not sure, then ask your teacher. Again, this is really, really key in terms of understanding when we can use these words. For example, cuppa. That is a piece of vocabulary. Cup. Same idea, but obviously the register is different. So in order to be able to communicate effectively, we need to understand the impact that words have on other people as well. And that's really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about register. Okay, obviously to know a word means to understand it when it's written or spoken. We need to be able to remember it. Have you ever had that awful feeling when you're in the middle of a conversation and you're trying to remember a word and then you remember it about 4 minutes too late and the conversation's already moved on? It's great to understand all of these things, but if you can't remember it when you need it, can you really say that you know it? That's a kind of philosophical question connected to vocabulary. We also need to be able to use it in a grammatically correct way. So here with collocation, we're talking about ways that words are used together, but here we're thinking about the grammar of the word. So for example, the word news. News is an uncountable noun. That means that we use it with is and not are. Just think about that for a second if that sounded a bit confusing. So to use it properly, is there any news, not are there any news. So we know that the grammar of the word news is that it's an uncountable noun. Again, to be able to use this word, we need to know the grammar. Derivatives, how to make word families. So obviously, if the word is eccentric, how do we make the noun, which is eccentricity? How to build word families. And the last one is, does the word have a certain strength? This is similar to connotation, but not exactly. So for example, the word surprised is not as strong as the word astonished. So all of these things work together. If we can say yes, I know the context, I know how to spell it, I know how to pronounce it, I know what collocations it forms, I know the connotation, I know the register, I can understand it when it's written and spoken, I can remember it when I need to remember it, I can use it grammatically correctly, I know how to make word families around this word, and I know the strength of the word itself, then I think that we can actually say, yes, I know this word. If there's anything missing here, then it's going to affect our ability to communicate with that word as well. So I'm not sure that we can say with 100% certainty, yes, I know the word. Or you might be able to say, yes, I know it, but I know it passively. I can't use it. And the idea is that a lot of our passive vocabulary can be activated just by understanding a little bit more about the way that the word is used. Okay, this brings us to the next slide really, which is how can you actually help yourself learn more vocabulary? And a lot of people have a lot of answers to this, but I think the two fundamental ones are ask the right questions. If you think about what it means to know a word, you might decide, okay, I understand the context, I understand the spelling, I don't really know what the register is, and I don't really know what the connotation is. So obviously the right question that you need to ask your teacher is, what is the connotation and what is the register? If you know the register but not the collocation, you need to ask your teacher, what's the collocation? What words does this word collocate with? In terms of relating to vocabulary, you need to take the responsibility for identifying what aspect of the word you don't know and asking the right question to find out what the answer is. The second thing is that you need to write it down. This is really, really key because if you don't record things, you don't revisit them, you don't revise them, you will not remember them. It's the bottom line. And a lot of people go into a class and they meet new words and they don't ask the right questions about the word and they don't record the word. So basically within about 24 hours it's going to be absolutely gone. You need to revise things again and again and again, otherwise you will lose probably about 80% of the new vocabulary that you acquire. So you do need to take responsibility for being active with the vocabulary that you're meeting as well. Those are really the two key things, asking the right questions and making sure that you write it down. So I'm hoping that this has given you some food for thought in terms of how you can actually ask better questions about vocabulary in class and how you can actually help yourself remember a little bit more. So I'm going to send you a big cheeky grin and say ciao for now.